thank you all for coming. I drove down in the rain, but I asked a couple of you if it was still raining, and you said no, so I was glad to hear that. I'm going to turn this over to our chairman and vice chairman of the 6-town committee. One to moderate, one to do the slideshow. After the slideshow is done, we'll entertain questions. So, Greg Snedeker is our vice chair, our secretary, our man for all jobs.
Wow.
And he does all of them well.
Well, thank you, Jane.
You do.
It's a nice compliment.
And he will pause.
Tell that to my wife.
He will
please.
be pausing. Well, did you bring her tonight?
No, she's not here.
He will pause each slide to make sure you've been able to read the whole thing. And he'll tell you anything else he wants to before this show starts. And our chairman is Alan Genovese. I should say Greg is from Gill. And Alan is from Warwick. And he is our chairman, and he also is a man of all talents. And that's what we need on this committee. We've been working for a long time, and we're getting tired, but we want to see it through to the end. So, without further ado, I will turn this over. No, I will not. Are there any select boards that need to call their meeting to order?
I'm Bishop from Northfield, so I will call the Northfield Select Board meeting to order at 6:36.
You need more than that.
No, we're good.
Who else did I see?
So Glenn Caffrey from Leiden calling the Leiden Select Board to order at 6:36.
I don't know if I can reach you, Brian.
I can talk loud enough, Jane.
Okay.
Brian Keir calling the Bernardston Select Board meeting to order at 6:30.
Okay. Warwick?
David Young admitting that we didn't post this meeting, and I'm sitting between these two select board members.
Okay.
You're all three select board members.
Okay. Very good. Well, my personal opinion is that you don't have to call it to order for what we're doing tonight. So with that, I will turn this over to Alan. Thank you.
All right, and thank you. I want to recognize Jane Dutcher for coordinating this meeting and getting out invitations and making sure it was posted and so forth. So a lot of work goes behind the scenes to organize something like this. So Jane, thank you so much. I've been informed that this is being live streamed. They think the signal is good enough for that to happen, so it is underway right now. I also want to just recognize Tyler, our Bourbeau, for being here and setting everything up and making sure that this is available to our communities to watch it on bnctv.net anytime you want to go back, or recommend to other people that they see what happened this evening. And we have some members of the planning board, and I do want to say we started in November 2019, right when the pandemic hit. We had a couple of meetings, and it really made it difficult because our intention was to get information, get it out to the public, have public forums, meeting with people. That changed our landscape. So we worked through consultants, we worked with small groups of people, we did some surveys, we conducted all our meetings remotely, and I'm not a fan of that. I've tried to adjust to it, but I like the in-person meetings personally. So I want to recognize the planning board for staying with it. We've had very little turnover during that time. We have some members here this evening, so I would like the planning board members that are here to please stand up and just introduce yourself and the town you're from so that people will know who you are.
Should we start with the front row? Start with Mike.
Mike?
Let's start.
I'm Mike Naughton from Montague. Steve Richter from Gill, from Leiden.
Welcome to Gill, Steve. We'll be happy to have you.
I'm Christy Silva. I'm from Bernardston.
I'm Deborah Cote from Northfield.
I'm Karen O'Neill from Leiden.
David Young from Warwick.
Renee Keir from Bernardston.
Thank you. So where we are being able to now meet in public, I wanted you to know that the planning board decided that it would be important to reach out to the leaders in the community. There was a meeting with Gil Montague, Boards of Selectmen and FinCom on November 14th, and we did this presentation with them, and it was followed up with some questions, and we're doing the same this evening. This is the beginning, really, of the outreach since we've started our work. Its purpose is to share information with you and answer questions you have, but it's only the beginning. From here, we plan to then go out and talk to students, to parents, attend some PTO meetings, get out to the larger community, get communication out to the public so that the boards of selectmen can start to get some feedback from the constituents once more information is provided and we solicit information. We plan to come back again and have another presentation on what we've heard through the next several months from folks, share that with you, and actually maybe engage in a conversation about your best thinking at that point in time and share those thoughts. The planning board will need to be making a recommendation to the at a town meeting to the boards of selectmen and have it on a warrant and have the people vote if we move forward in making a recommendation to consider regionalization. The last step to that process would be putting together a regional agreement to see what that would look like. And there are a lot of factors involved in that from all the stakeholders regarding how the assessments would be taken, how the elections would occur, and that would involve heavily all of the feedback from different stakeholders in the community, specifically the boards of selectmen, FinComs, and so forth. So we have still a lot of work to do, even though we've been at this for a while, but we're hoping that we're seeing the end of this process so we can make a recommendation. Greg and I were able to write a grant, and we're hoping that that gets funded. We hope it's probably one of the last grants that we write to conclude our work. We have a letter of support and from all of the state representatives as we pursue this. And I just want to reiterate, we're doing this on your behalf. Some years ago, I was not aware of it at the time, that the towns took a vote to form a planning board. That was the process, and for us to do this work. So the work we are doing in a planning board, we're doing it on your behalf. So we are here to serve you. We are here to get your questions, find those answers, and have guidance from you as we continue this process and finish up our work. So with that said, Jane, you asked me to be brief. I'm getting the look. So I'll turn it over to Greg. We'll go through this presentation. You'll see two things happening. We're fortunate that Deb Pote did the voiceover that is on this. The planning board put together this slide presentation. And so she's talking in general about each slide. There's not quite enough time to hear everything she's saying. There's enough time to hear what she's saying, but not enough time to read it concurrently. So Greg will be pausing, making sure that everyone has a chance to at least read the slide. We'll hold questions to the end, like Jane said, and then we'll move to the next slide. And so that's how we'll proceed until we get to the end. Any questions? Greg, any comments?
Well, the video is a little, as you can see, it's a little blurry. It had to do with a formatting issue. We put it up on YouTube. Tyler explained to me what needed to be done. I'm more of an audio guy, so haven't gotten around to cleaning this up. But I do have the slides available behind this. So if someone's having trouble reading a slide, I can call up the slide from the PowerPoint. And so we'll go slowly through it, and I will be pausing it to make sure that everybody has a chance to read it. And if you're having trouble reading it, I will quickly go to the PowerPoint, okay? So we'll get started, and I'll, kind of use my judgment as to where we pause it. Some of them, it takes a little more time, so I don't think it'll be a problem, but others, I'll pause and have a chance to read the slide. All right, here we go.
Welcome to all. Thank you for your interest in this presentation and for wanting to learn more about the work the Six-Town Regionalization Planning Board has been doing since the fall of 2019. My name is Deborah Potee, and I'm a concerned parent and citizen of the town of Northfield, and I'm representing the Six-Town Regionalization Planning Board. As a community member, I am concerned about the future of our schools, and so volunteered to be appointed to this board by the town moderator. The work of our board has been focused on gathering information and data to better understand the reasons for regionalizing 2 school districts, Pioneer Valley Regional School with Gil Montague, the focus of 7th through 12th grades. We then have worked to understand the benefits and challenges of combining districts, and again, focusing on what we know in terms of information and data. I will not be reading the slides, but highlighting salient points and will allow plenty of time for the slides to be read. The slideshow presentation is based on the work accomplished by the consultant groups, Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools, MARS, and the Abrahams Group, information gathered from a series of information sessions with school administrators, teachers, and staff from both school districts, DESE, and our own research. As we move through the slideshow, please hold any questions you may have until the end. Some questions you may have might not be able to be answered in the moment, but we will do our best to address what we do know. We as a board have not been formed to make any decision, but to present information to the larger community based upon our work. We have been charged to make recommendations in the future, but now is a time for sharing information. Thank you. Over the past 3 years, we have met monthly with smaller subcommittees, including an Education and Finance Committee that met more often. The board has had very little turnover, which has helped build community and a sense of collective strengths, open-mindedness, and commitment to the goals of our work. An outcome of combining would be the doubling of the student population, which would automatically increase opportunities for all students. Based on 2021-22 data from DESE, PVRS has a population of 657 students in total, with 276 students in grades 7th through 12th, 153 in the high school, 123 in the middle school. Gil Montague has a population of 845 students total, with 376 students in grades 6 through 12, 184 in the high school, and 192 in the middle school. Pioneer graduated 23 seniors last year. Gil Montague graduated 36. This is a list of determined outcomes based upon larger numbers of students. These are guaranteed benefits of regionalizing. This is a list generated from meetings with school administrations and faculties from both districts that happened over this past spring of 2022. Both districts were invited to participate in sessions to share information about their respective schools and imagine what might happen with a merger. Combining districts would allow potentially for some greater community outreach and collaboration with outside partnerships. This would depend on vision, leadership, and effort to increase and expand what community partnerships already exist. Staffing, both at the administrative and faculty level, would have to stabilize, and a shared and supported vision for this larger district would have to be determined. Again, these outcomes could happen with a larger population, but might depend on what positions are allocated for funding and how departments are reconfigured. Combining districts based upon increase in population alone will bring stability to sports in terms of being able to field teams and perhaps expand opportunities. These outcomes, with combining districts, perhaps brought the greatest enthusiasm from the faculty participants in the spring forums. Currently, both school districts' teachers are experiencing teaching a subject in isolation with just one upper school English teacher or just one science teacher in the middle school. Having colleagues in the same subject area is a significant aspect of being a teacher for many reasons. Having a larger and more diverse faculty can strengthen the curriculum in many different ways, including strengthening teaching skills and deepening knowledge of subjects. This slide shows attending enrollment figures for the two districts. Attending enrollment is important because the number of students actually at the schools affects what programs can be offered. The solid lines show actual enrollments for the past 10 years. Over the period, Pioneer's attending enrollment has declined by Over the period, Pioneer's attending enrollment has declined by 42%. 42%, and Gilmontague's has declined by 17%. The dashed lines show projections done by the New England School Development Council, or NESDEC, in 2018, and the dotted lines show NESDEC projections done in 2021, in the middle of the COVID pandemic. As with all the following charts, a link to the Excel spreadsheet that it came from is shown at the bottom. This slide shows attending enrollment for the two high schools. The green line shows what enrollments would be if the two schools had been combined.
We can come back to these slides afterward too.
And shows what enrollments would be if the two schools had. On the financial side, we expect that there may be little or no financial savings. This is partly because we assume that the projected savings would be applied to enhancing the educational programming. A significant challenge is that we expect that a combined district would be held harmless, as Pioneer is now, meaning that increases in Chapter 70 state aid would likely be minimal. This slide shows foundation enrollments for the two districts. Foundation enrollment is important because the state uses that to calculate Chapter 70 aid. Again, the solid lines show actual enrollments for the past 10 years. Over the period, Pioneer's foundation enrollment has declined by 29%, and Gilmontague's has declined by 9%. The dashed line shows projections done by the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, in 2020, and the dotted lines show DESE projections in 2021. We asked DESE why the 2021 projections show foundation enrollment remaining level, but we didn't get an answer. This slide shows foundation enrollments including Franklin County Technical School. Some people have speculated that FCTS has been a factor in declining enrollments in the district. This slide shows choice in, choice out comparison comparisons for the two districts. Pioneer shows a net positive that has been declining over time. Gil-Montague shows a net deficit over time that has remained more or less constant. Here we have a comparison of actual FY22 assessments in the current configurations and what those might be in a new district using various calculation methods. These are for FY22 and assume a combined district budget that equals the sum of the actual district budgets. They also assume that required local contributions, RLCs, would not change. The black bars show actual town assessments for FY22. The next 4 bars show what using attending or foundation enrollments in single year or rolling average might look like. The green bar shows what using RLC, which is a state's calculation of what towns are actually able to afford, might look like. It is important to note that the graphs are not done to the same scale. Montague, Bernardston-Northfield, and Gill show millions, while Leiden and Warwick show thousands. The STRPB has taken no position on a recommended assessment of calculation method. That will be one of the issues addressed if we get to the point of drafting a proposed regional agreement. This slide shows Chapter 78 for the two districts for the past 10 years, along with how much of it has been due to hold harmless. Pioneer has been in hold harmless for the entire period. Gil-Montague was in hold harmless for several years, but recently, except for FY22, has not been, and therefore has benefited from Chapter 78 increases. Over the period, Gil-Montague's Chapter 78 has increased by 29%, while Pioneer's has increased by 5%.
And looks like I messed up. The top says FY23 data. The voiceover says FY22. Some of the graphs say FY22. I believe it really is FY23 data. And I just didn't change the labels, and the script is incorrect. But if you go to the spreadsheet, which is, the link is at the bottom, if you're interested in the numbers, there's a spreadsheet for FY22 and another one for FY23 out on our website. So you can see the actual numbers there. And I apologize, looking at this slide, you might think that we don't know what we're talking about. So, yeah, we kind of do, but this slide doesn't prove it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
These findings come from TransFinder, a transportation consultant group, and are based upon redesigning the routes to accommodate the combined districts. These determinations were based upon assessments of both facilities done by the Mars Group with help from the facilities managers. These are the challenges of combining districts. We list the ones that other districts that have done this type of regionalization have shared. There may be other challenges that are unknown right now. The goal in this presentation is to focus on what is known. Thank you for your good attention and for making the time to learn more about the work and findings of the Six-Town Regionalization Planning Board. We are grateful for your interest. Our work is ongoing with the goal of eventually making a recommendation to move forward or not. If we determine that regionalization is the better option, all 6 towns would then have to vote to regionalize. If one town votes not to, combining the 2 districts will not happen.
Just so that
Sure.
people want to copy it or whatever. Well, thank you for watching that, and we are open to questions. We will do our best to answer them, and if we cannot do that, I will make a note of the question and try to make sure that as we move forward, I'm sure other people will be asking that question. I'll try to get the answers back when we loop back.
If they have a question, they need to go to the mic.
Oh, thank you. And so since this is being recorded and will be available to the public, if you have a question, what a horrible way to
Well, actually, what we could
intimidate.
Well, what we could do is,
Yeah.
if you ask a question, we can restate the question since we have mics on, and that way it gets recorded.
So you'll have a choice. You can
I have a
either
question.
do that or go to the mic, and we'll go
I'll
from
just
there.
ask my question. I think everybody can hear me.
Oh, it was for the TV purposes.
Oh, for the TV.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can restate it.
I don't know if I missed this, but would that mean by regionalizing, would that mean we would have our own one elementary school, one middle school, and one high school? No.
So that's a great question. So the question was, if we were to regionalize, would we have a separate middle school, high school, and elementary school?
Right.
So that's a great question because people have gotten confused with the work that we're doing because we've been focusing on the middle school and the high school. So it would in fact be a pre-K through 12 regional school district, a new school district. The elementaries would be in their respective communities, the students, And then the middle school students would be attending the Pioneer School, and the high school students would be attending the Turnus Falls. And that's why when we got to the transportation piece, you know, the elementaries, there's not movement there. If there's a program for special education or something tailored that we're able to do now and not have to bring them to another district because of the capacities that we have, then that might be something, an anomaly to moving. But basically, it's just the middle school, Turnus Falls, coming here, or the high school from Pioneer going to Turnus Falls.
So, but it would separate the two, the middle school students and the high school
Correct. They would be in two separate facilities.
Right.
And we looked at this advancement of the facilities. They're all beautiful facilities, but there is a progression from the elementary to what Pioneer has in their facility. Very well kept. It would be lovely for a middle school. And then the next progression would be at Turnus Falls, where they have, you know, a pool, and they have other advantages in terms of the way that facility goes. So the kids would always have something to look forward to if we were to do this.
Right. Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
Well, thank you for asking that, because that's, I think, has led to a lot of confusion. Other questions? Yes.
My name's Keith Ross. I'm from Warwick, as selectman there. And also, I think the presentation was very good. I think you guys did a great job putting it all together. It's very informative. And I've also been a long-time chair of a small college. And one of the things that we've noticed over the years is it's important to include diversity. You know, a broader opportunity for diversity, not only at the teacher level to attract more interest, but at the student level too. And those two will affect each other as a way of providing a broader base of education for the students.
Tyler, were you able to capture that on the sound?
You should repeat it. My name is Keith Ross.
Oh, no, I guess.
Yeah, Keith.
So Keith Ross was making the point that if a district was combined, his experience at a college level, a small college level, that there are benefits to the diversity that you have when you bring populations together, where they can learn from each other and interact from each other, and I guess my words would be become stronger.
But actually go out and seek a diversity of teachers, so you have a diversity of backgrounds and you know, races and color and experiences, you know, and that will also help attract students. You know, they'll feel their peers are there, and it's easier for them to connect.
I think maybe we'll do the walking mic. Those are all really great points that I hope get captured. He also had emphasized that it would attract teachers with diversity to address the diversity within the population of a combined student body.
Yeah, and to that point, with an expanded high school and middle school faculty, you would have more of that, since you would have, you know, more faculty in each building being able to collaborate and bring their different experiences to the classroom. Yep.
Can I respond to that too?
Yes.
One of the things,
No, it's on the
okay,
TV.
one of the things that we've talked about in the education subcommittee was just that, the diversity, and how that might attract more students and more teachers, as well as being a very positive thing to come out of this merger.
Hi, Brian Snell, Select Board Member from Warwick. Written into the plan, as you know, we've been going through an awful lot of work in Warwick for the last few years of getting our school reopened, and we thought we had a locked-in plan with Pioneer. Is the elementary model going to be locked into this plan for all the towns?
So I don't have to repeat that question because it got recorded. I would answer it this way. If it comes to the point of writing a regional agreement, then that's when things get codified on what the members' towns would like to see in this regional agreement. And so that would involve the entire district and the elementary, the middle school, and the high school. So when you say locked in, I'm assuming you're talking about a regional agreement and what language would be included in that.
So would that language be written in prior to you going to the towns or after you've gone to the towns?
So the way that process works is we would hire a consultant. We would be working with town officials to determine a number of factors. What type of assessment? Will it be the standard assessment from the state? Will it be a rolling average? How would the composition of the school committee be chosen and the representation, and as well as how decisions are made in terms of the number of towns that have to support any changes to elementary, middle school, or high school. So that would be written into the regional agreement that was being brought forward to the towns to consider whether or not they wanted to support the regional agreement.
I would just add that when the planning board was formed, the charge from the towns in terms of how it was framed in terms of our organizing this planning board was that the elementary schools would remain the way they are, and that it was really looking at the declining enrollment in the middle school and high school, and the proposal was to put the middle schoolers in one building and the high schoolers in another building. So that was always the charge. It was not really formed with the idea of, closing or consolidating elementary schools. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but I think in terms of writing a district agreement, if the towns would like to move forward, I think that's a political hurdle at this point that is not really on the table in terms of how we see it. So I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, it would have to come from the towns that would want to be something that they would want to do, and I don't see that happening at this point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add something to that. What Greg and Alan have said is true, but the way I see it, the question of whether Warwick would be officially part of a new district is up in the air right now. And we as the STRPB have not discussed that. According to the state law, it's perfectly possible for us to produce more than one regional agreement, for example, if we wanted to do that. One for 6 towns and one for 5 towns.
Correct.
And we, as the STRPB, we all may have our opinions at this point, but we haven't talked about that. So to the question of, is it off the table? I think nothing's off the table at this point.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, and I would say that, again, it would come back to the town. To me, that's a decision Warwick would want to profess either to be a part of or not. It's not really, we can come up with 2 different district agreements and have them vary if, a town is sort of on the fence about joining a new district. But, to Mike's point, there's nothing off the table, but I also think that it would have to come from the towns for it to be on the table. Because even drafting a regional agreement, we're going to have to work closely with the town leaders to do that and with the school committees.
And just to clarify, should Warwick be leaving, we will have at least a temporary agreement with Pioneer as it sits. So I hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Yep.
There's a question down here too, Jane.
David McCarthy, Northfield Finance Committee. One of the slides mentioned fixes and improvements to the, I'm assuming, schools. So how did you folks determine what needed to be fixed? What kind of improvements were required? Is it going to be done immediately, long-term? What was the litmus test for these?
Mike's going to answer that.
He's on our FTF committee.
Yeah, the fixes and improvements were identified by the consultants who did walkthroughs of the facilities with the facilities managers. And I agree, they're pretty vague at this point. We haven't done a more detailed analysis of what might be necessary.
Yeah, I mean,
This is more of a statement than a question. Basically, what I'm hearing is everything being the same, what this will do for the towns as far as doing that. This elementary schools would stay the same.
Correct.
The middle school, which we are sending kids out to anyway, would be at a different place, say Pioneer rather than Turner's Falls. And the advantage of all this is now we have enhanced programs because we have enough population to bring in teachers, to bring in academics, to bring in after-school activities without really impacting, increasing the burden on the taxpayers because we're already going to be doing that. So to me, as far as doing that, it's almost like a no-brainer that this is going to enhance the schools, enhance the kids more. And if we don't do anything going forward, it's at the sacrifice of our students. So that's my statement for today.
So just to pigtail on that, Heath Cummings from Northfield. So if we don't have these people in our district now that Dan's mentioning, we're going to bring in this and bring in that, how are we going to float that bill if we're going to bring in additional people? And how is the assessments with this merger going to be affected? Because it's clearly not going to make costs go down. How much are we expecting costs to go up on the assessments to the towns with this merger?
So I think there's just a clarification of a point that was made earlier, which is that the staff, in this model that we're looking at, the staff would be the same staff. And so we're not bringing a new staff. However, as people leave, you would be enticing people to approach the diversity. Just to build, though, on your point, for example, both Pioneer and Gil-Montague have tremendous programs of study for opportunities for kids, but they don't have the ability, for example, if you wanted to take a particular course and you're the only one that signs up for it, either try to do it as an independent study, but if you don't have the teacher population to be able to teach a course load and handle independent studies on the side, it makes it extremely difficult. By combining this, it accomplishes several things. You're not competing with, do I take this course and it's going to be running the same as this other course over here, and so therefore I can't take it. When you have a combined staff and student population, you can run that same course several times, which expands the opportunity for kids to take that in other courses that they're interested in. You don't have the teacher that doesn't have a colleague to talk with about designing curriculum and designing courses, which is a real benefit to this in terms of the professional development, and they're building their relationships and supporting each other and providing I don't want to say a more rigorous, because they work really hard at what they're doing, but the more minds you get together to share information, the better things are. You would have, just to shift to sports for a second, to not have a middle school sports program in a number of areas that kids are interested, but then say, well, you can be on the JV or however they do that. They're not developing those skills. They're not having that opportunity to be on the field and learn. So band would be a perfect example into something that Greg knows a lot about. If you try to have a band with 5 people, they don't really know what it sounds like if you have 30 kids in a band and the music that can be produced. So there's so many opportunities academically, programs and services that it leads me to feel that that's a tremendous benefit for kids. We have to weigh that into the other part about the assessments. It's not a direct, we're hiring all these new staff. But we're trying to clarify now what the assessments will look like in terms of today,
Yeah, but
because a lot has changed.
I think but to answer your question, we actually do see savings in this. The projected savings would be in central office. I mean, we wouldn't need 2 superintendents and 2 business directors, and so the projected savings of about 400,000. The expectation was to put that back into programming if you want particular areas that you want to enhance. It really comes down to economy. It's not just economies of scale of finances, it's economies of scale of actual enrollment. And a class with 5 people in it, 5 students, you expand that to 10, you don't need to hire another teacher. You just are filling up the classroom a little more. What it does do, though, is if you expand a class from 10 to 20, and now you can have 2 sections of it, it gives you flexibility in your schedule. You can offer more electives. You can actually field those electives better because you're not, if you have one algebra class and all your 9th graders are in it because you have low enrollment, they can't take an elective that's running side by in the same period. So the minute you all of a sudden are offering 2 algebra classes, now they have a choice. Oh, I wanted to take that elective. I can still take algebra in period, G or H or whatever it's going to be. And so what you're doing is you're enhancing your programs without necessarily it costing more. You're just building it through the economies of scale of your student population. So now you can have a varsity and JV team, because we've seen students leave Gil Montague to go to Tech, and it's not necessarily that even wanted to go to Tech. Well, I shouldn't say they had many reasons, but one of the reasons was that they had a daughter that wanted to play softball, and they only had a varsity team, and she didn't think she was ever going to play on the varsity team, and she could go to Tech and play on a JV team and be happy playing there because they just have more students to be able to populate those teams. So it's tough when you begin to get really small. When you get under 200 with a high school, as someone that's taught high school for a very long time, those constraints on your curriculum really intensify when you start getting below 150. Teams start going away. You just can't populate them. And what that means is that the students that might have been attracted to your school for those teams are no longer going to be attracted to your school because you just don't have those teams anymore. And it begins to spiral down. And so you begin to lose more and more students because you just don't have a critical mass to support your programs. So, financially, it's, as you can see, it's not, this great cost savings. But if you look at it through a cost benefit in terms of, okay, we're going to combine the 2 districts and have a, let's say a $38 million budget for a new district. What can you do with that when now you have, upwards of 300 plus in your high school to be able to field those teams, and the same in your, and your electives and your flexibility and being able to schedule courses. That's more sustainable in terms of what you can offer on the benefit side, even though the costs may not be, maybe a wash, but you're going to be gaining a lot of benefit for that. Does that make sense?
It does, but what about the fact that Gil Montague overall has higher wages across the board, and you'd have to raise Pioneer up to where they're going to be? So the discussion came up in the last one of these meetings with no real definitive answer. I mean, that's a significant increase that's going to have to be absorbed somewhere with a new regional agreement.
So one of the things we put into this next grant is to actually look. In a previous grant, we looked at spots and what that would look like. In this grant, we would actually, where everyone is held harmless because no one can make less, to create a new salary schedule and then see what that would look like, so that we are getting more on point to what would an actual budget look like with taking, I don't know, 15, 60 million, whatever Pioneer is and whatever Gil Montague, and putting it together and say, okay, what would we be able to do with that? So we're looking into that, we're taking a deeper dive into that point. And that was a good observation on your part, I might say, in terms of how does it benefit kids? Other questions?
I was just going to follow up with what Greg was saying. You think about the elementary schools too, in terms of shifting potential. Let's talk about the band, okay? If you think about the elementary schools in Pioneer, right? I don't know if it's happening still, but they used to have an elementary school band teacher, right? Instruction started in 4th grade. That's when you start musicians in 4th grade because they're not embarrassed to play the instrument badly. You don't start them in 7th grade because that's too embarrassing. You have to start them early. So potentially, if the district decides, oh, this is going to be a value to us, we are going to invest in instruction, band instruction for students, so that by the time they get to 7th grade, there would be a band in the middle school, and then there would be a band in the upper school. You know, I experienced band for my daughter in 7th grade through 9th grade. At Pioneer, they had 100 students. That was part of the culture, is that kids played music. Now, I don't know what the band looks like now currently, but I know maybe 2 years ago, before COVID, there were maybe 40 students in band. Big difference, and that's true at Greenfield High School. There are under 40 students in the band, and there's no chorus at Greenfield High School currently, because people are choosing not to invest, right? So it would certainly take sort of the energy, the will of lots of desperate communities to say this is a value to us. So it's just a way of looking at it, what it could look like.
Yeah, one thing to consider is you're going to be combining all your elementary schools into one larger district, which means they're all feeding into one district, not into two, and being sort of going off into the respective districts.
And would it be possible for you to stand, only
Of
because
course.
it would be helpful? You happen to be right behind the pole.
Oh.
And they're trying
Lion
to,
legs,
yeah,
Bobby.
they're trying to record so that the pole
Thank
wasn't
you.
in the way. Thank you.
Mary Bowen, Northfield Select Board. When do we hear from the leaders of these schools, the superintendents and stuff? Or have you heard, and what is their take on this, on a possible regionalization? Is the consensus in? Do we get to talk about that yet? And are any of them here tonight? Thank you.
So neither superintendent is here. I will say that Mike Sullivan began this process a while ago as he was seeing Turners Falls losing programs and seeing services, kids missing out on opportunities. And he has been very involved in our meetings. He attends our meetings. He's provided feedback.
That's not
Brian Beck, I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay, you've mentioned Michael
Oh,
Sullivan.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Michael Sullivan,
So-
that was the first
So
one.
he was the first one.
He was the first one to actually
I didn't make a good
propose
transition.
the six-town.
And then Brian,
Okay.
and then Brian
Brian
Beck
Beck took
is
over.
the superintendent now. He's attended our meetings. He's given really good feedback. He's made good suggestions. So he's been very active in supporting our efforts and helping us in research and answering questions and so forth. There was not much support from the previous superintendent in going through this process and working with the consultants. We eventually worked through that to get information from Pioneer. The present superintendent, I haven't really gauged yet. She hasn't attended, I don't know if she's attended any of our meetings. I am hopeful that she will express more interest in what opportunities would be available for kids if we were to increase the population of the middle school and the high school. So I will continue to engage her to hear what her thoughts are. My sense is right now she's putting her energies, and rightfully so as a superintendent, to make Pioneer the best it can be in this moment and work with the teachers and the staff and the students to provide the best opportunities that are available given the circumstances that she's working in.
And just to say, follow up, would one of those superintendents, or would there just, if we regionalized it, would there just be one superintendent and one would maybe have another
Right.
position with,
So
but
I-
not two superintendents.
Right,
right.
I'm
Okay.
I would anticipate that there'd be a transition period, and we'd ask the state for additional money. Having been a superintendent for 18 years, and having, seeing how this would happen in a transition, I would think first of all, you would have one superintendent. I would think that off-site or on the other site, between Pioneer and Gil Montague, that there'd be some kind of an assistant superintendent or something in place for a couple of years so that there was a really smooth transition. But in the end, you just need one superintendent, one business administrator, one payroll, one's accounts payable, and I could go on, one treasurer for the district. And that's why you have the savings that we would like to put into benefiting programs and services to students.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you'd also have reduction in staff because you can, instead of having one teacher teaching 10, you'd have one teacher teaching maybe 15 or 20. So you will see a reduction in staff. Or what you would see is that staff member would go into a different class or teach a different subject as far as doing that. So it would be, to the benefit to try to work with the staff here to see who would be willing to, transform that. Because a lot of them will probably say, I was teaching 10 students, now we're teaching 15, 20. You don't need to have that many teachers, unfortunately.
And that's where the other sections could then open up,
Right,
where
yeah.
a teacher would love to be teaching in another area, well, the same content area, but
Or even electives in their own subject area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Language or something that they
Yeah.
probably don't teach anymore.
Yeah, there's English electives that aren't being taught that, would love to be taught. at
And
this
we're
point.
fortunate. We have Karen O'Neill, who is here. She was a teacher in Pioneer for a number of years, and she's been on the curriculum and personnel committee. And so she has a really good understanding of, the curriculum and what we're able to do. When my daughter graduated from Pioneer in the early 90s, it was different than it is today. You had 4, yeah. So she's had to live through some of the changes over time as the population has decreased.
Hi, Mike Naughton from Montague. Just a quick follow-up on your point, and then I have another comment. But in our conversations on the board, a lot of the educational benefits, a significant part of the educational benefits that we've seen possibly coming from a merger would be that we wouldn't be losing teachers. That we'd have the same number of teachers, but as you say, if you've got 2 teachers who are each teaching 10 kids, you've got 1 teacher now teaching 20 kids, you then have an extra teacher to do something else.
Teach elective, yeah.
And that a number of the benefits that we showed in the slide resulted from having more teachers with this, essentially available to do other things.
Yeah, it's not so much more teachers, just more availability.
I'd like to make a comment on the earlier point about the costs and what that might look like for the towns. I think this meeting is in many ways much like our meetings on the STRPB. We've talked a lot about the potential educational benefits from having more students and combining the faculties and doing that. We've talked less about the financial implications and how all that might work. And that's been partly because it's been easier to get data, and the data is more firm about what the student populations might look like and what the benefits might be from having bigger student populations. We did work with some consultants trying to do some work on the financial side. I was the chair of the subcommittee. Jane was a valuable member of that subcommittee, and she may have some comments here, but My take is we didn't get as much from the consultants as I had hoped that we would. What will happen, we do expect to see some savings in the central office. We don't expect to see savings from teacher salaries because we don't expect any teachers to go away. What would happen when we would have to merge all the teachers and really everybody into a new set of contracts. The expectation is that would cost more, although the consultants did come up with figures that showed in some cases things like benefits costing less. But exactly what would happen, that would all be done by a new school committee for a new district if the towns decide to go ahead. So that's not even something the STRPB is going to do. We would come up with a regional agreement, but part of that regional agreement would be electing a new school committee, and the new school committee would then be having to create contracts with, for a new district. I do think that the educational benefits are a clear plus in my mind for doing this. Financially, I'm not so sure. I think that the big question mark is on the financial side, and the being held harmless is a big piece of that. Whether it will be possible for a combined district to keep on offering all the things that we envision it as being able to offer on day one if state aid doesn't really increase very much. And again, what state aid is going to do in the future, you probably know there's been some changes to Chapter 70 recently, the whole rural aid thing. There are people in the legislature who are working pretty hard on getting more money for schools like the ones around here. So it's very hard to predict the future, but I do, personally, I was on the financial subcommittee because I think the finances are a big piece. I think they're an important piece. I think we know less about them than we do about the educational benefits, and I do think there's some question marks there. So I think it's important just to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just follow up that doing just Chapter 70 projections and looking at assessments, because we were going through COVID and we saw major fluctuations in enrollment. Our NASDAQ projections were, we funded some NASDAQ projections that we thought were just kind of basically useless, partly because, for instance, Gilmani, you lost 100 students in 1 year, which they got at least half of them back, but it was because of the pandemic just throwing things into an upheaval. It was hard to get good projections. So we're kind of, to Mike said, we're sort of in a question mark because we kind of need things to settle so we can run the numbers again.
One last little comment. By the way, I'm Dan Campbell. I'm on the Finance Committee. I'm also a town clerk in Northfield. And just to let you know, we've had an uptick of younger people moving into town and an uptick of births in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a good increase in that way. So that hopefully will reflect in the future, but that's still a little ways to come. But we're seeing an increase has plateaued off, and now we're seeing a little bit increase in population, which is kind of nice. Just to let you know, the future is still there.
Yeah, well, the migration is coming from east to west right now. Yeah.
Got free of the snare. I'm David Young. I'm town coordinator in Warwick, elected school committee member of this planning board. I want to remind folks that the pandemic has made us, at the municipal level, at the school district level, awash in one-time money. And we're feeling a little bit more financially comfortable than I think we should be. And I think in my town, we've worked really hard to use this one-time money for capital type expenses, but it's meant that we've really stretched the definition. Human capital, funding, training police officers at the Bridge Academy, a whole lot of things though that aren't hitting our bottom line. And the schools are no exception. I know that's true at Pioneer. So we don't like change, but change is going to be forced upon us if we don't plan for it. I've seen the projections for Pioneer, and we're facing a financial cliff not many years out. There's going to need to be changes. But I wasn't particularly happy at the onset with the disinterest in trying to save money, but instead trying to save and enhance course offerings. But I think it's a good goal. But we are going to need to do something different, or we're going to back into it as Pioneer. Already once financially failed, it would be easy to do it again.
So I just have a follow-up comment. I don't know what role it is, whether it's on the Pioneer School Committee or the 6-Town Regional Planning Board or the Board of Selectmen, or, and it's this. I became a member of this committee because my whole life has been dedicated to, it was my vocation to benefit kids and to do what the best thing is for kids in offering programs and services. And I've been blessed with a wonderful career that I've been able to do that. When I looked at Pioneer and I looked at the financial part, and at that point it was just Pioneer I was looking at, I was saying that cliff is coming fast. And it's my belief that we're actually here. And it's being camouflaged by the ESSER money that has been pouring into districts, that we've been able to do things within the schools, but we're not doing it through the funding that, the local funding or through the state funding. We're getting different funding for that. So I think it's disguising that. I also attended a financial forum that was being put on, and they selected 3 districts. One was down the Cape, one was I forget where in Massachusetts, and then it was Pioneer. And they were talking about not sustainable, and they were looking at the formula and how it was working. So we were one of the districts that was being selected as not being sustainable. Now that was this consultant's or this person's belief when he was using 3 examples, but that hit home for me in terms of, I just want to make sure whatever we do, that we're doing the best we can to have it affordable to the towns. But my major goal in life and here is to offer a rigorous, sustainable education for kids, that they can go out in the world and be prepared to do whatever they want to do. And as one of my kids graduated from Pioneer, she's an attorney, she's very successful, she got a great education. There were a lot more kids there at that time. And I look at the school now, and they're doing the best they can, but I'm disheartened by how many programs they've lost over the years. And so I have an interest in that.
Why do you think that is?
I think there are a number of reasons. I think demographics, people are having fewer kids. I think that people are retiring in this area. I think there's a lot of reasons behind it. It's not just, Massachusetts has been losing population, student population for quite a while.
Well, the western part.
And particularly Western Massachusetts. And so there's a lot of factors that are contributing to that. I think it's going to, we can turn that around. We can revigorate what we offer here. Think about, I find it frustrating, I'll vent here for a minute. We have so much in resources of clean water and clean air that all these cities and towns are enjoying, that we have land that is put aside, that the state has, to have these beautiful parks and these places of habitats for animals and all these resources, and yet we don't get the benefit in terms of more state aid to pay for land that is under their jurisdiction. So that's one piece of the problem. And the more land you have there, the less development you have. I like our rural nature. We want to keep that. But I do think we can attract and be competitive and increase population as we get high-speed internet and the services that people can get in more localized areas.
I got to make one comment. to the point that we might be able to grow our way out of this problem, that is a fallacy where Pioneer is concerned. Pioneer is in hold harmless, and the result, which means that we're already getting more local aid, more Chapter 70 aid than we deserve. So that when we get an additional kid, we get $30, and we get a little pint of rural aid. So, and the Pioneer District is moving, there are two components. I never wanted to understand local aid. Michael Naughton understands it. I went to a class on it, and I've come away with a few things, and one of them is that Pioneer is moving out of foundation aid. We're going to get less and less of that second constituent, whereas Gil Montague is no longer in hold harmless, so an additional child will result in additional local aid. When I started paying attention to this stuff 30 or 40 years ago, it was about 50-50, local aid, local contribution. Now it's about 65, 35, or 2/3, 1/3. It's not going up at our end. And the combination, the formula looks at a community's real estate values and income. And these are rising in the pioneer towns, so that our local aid is going to continue to not grow.
Yeah, I mean,
growth is not going to be our solution. Finding a sweet spot of operations, an efficient place, doing things as rationally as possible. But growth isn't going to get us out of this.
So Greg and then Jane, you want to make a comment too. Do you want to go first?
I was just going to ask you a question.
Yeah, you go first.
You said we could grow out of this. So my question is, can we grow out of it before we fall off the cliff?
Well, can I?
So
You don't have to answer
yeah,
that.
I don't know if did I use the words grow out of it? I think we can help to reverse this trend and attract more students. There are only so many students to be had though, and I think that's the point. So we don't want to be losing students that might stay in our district if we had more opportunities for them.
Yeah, I'll just
Is that
chime
fair?
in. Yeah, I'll chime in. So I agree with David. And I've been on the select board in Gill this is my 9th year. And we're doing this. We did the same thing. We got the one-time ARP funds come in, and so we allocated it to police cruisers and a fire truck and a highway truck, and with the thought that other costs coming down the pipe, that we would address those later. This would give us a little bit of a buffer in terms of how our cash flow is going to work. But to your point too, and to your point, by increasing those enrollments, you're going to be helping the students sooner than later. If you wait, I mean, this is my personal experience as someone that's taught now, almost 30 years, but the last 17 in 7 through 12, which is at a small school that's struggling with enrollment. And I've watched it. I've watched teams go away. I've watched our arts decline in terms of our programmatic offerings. I don't, I want to say that we have poor offerings, but we would have much more robust offerings if we had more students. So the way I see it is, I mean, you can try to go it alone. Gil Montague, what wasn't mentioned was that the decline was much steeper between 2000 and 2010. There was, I think, a 17% decline in the last 10 years, but the previous 10 years, it was much more significant. So they had enrollment, I think, of upwards of like 1,700, somewhere in there, and now we're down at 850. And that's a major decline in enrollment. And to think you're going to get it back in the next, few years, I think is wishful thinking. I mean, even though you're having that migration east because Boston's having housing issues, and so people are moving west. But I mean, we're also, to Alan's point, I mean, Gill is 52% chapter and state-owned land, APR, you name it. We can't develop it. I mean, where are they going to go? I mean, we just don't have the housing, and a lot of your towns are the same way. We've gone down this road of protecting land, which is admirable, and I don't want to see that change either. But it makes our ability to grow very challenging. Yeah.
I'm Stan Garland. I'm a selectman in the town of Bernardston. I think that what you folks are doing is a great job. I tip my hat to you. I know I couldn't sit through some of the meetings that you guys have been sitting through, and going through all the data and the numbers. But the point is I think we understand what the problems are. We want to start hearing more of what the solutions are. And I think we need to get to the next level where we can have something that we can really look at and show us what the numbers are going to be, what the enrollments are going to be, so we can move forward. Cost is always going to be a factor. I don't care what anybody says. In our town, cost is going to be a big factor. Everybody wants more money in their paycheck. On the other side of that, they don't want to pay it in taxes. So it gets a little sticky there. But again, I appreciate what you're doing. And make sure when you go out and knock on doors, you're just not knocking on teachers and parents' doors, but you're knocking on senior citizens' doors and getting everybody's input. Because I think we all want the same thing, a good education for our children and programs that we can all appreciate at the schools. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and Stan, we have a number of reports, like the Mars report, which is at least 100 pages long, which will give you detailed information in regard to, I'm throwing it out there. Just go to the website. We have a financial report, which is, and Mike would agree, which is because of the conditions that we were under, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. We would like to see, if the town's going to move forward, we absolutely need more financial information. But the Mars report, as far as the educational sort of costs and benefits to it, I think is very good, and I think it's worth the read. So, when you get about 100 pages, you can do it.
Can you put the website back up?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Jane, you also have down next to Deb.
Just a quick comment.
I just wanted to make sure we get some more questions going too, if we could.
Oh, sure. This will be quick. And apologize for slightly off topic, but to respond to David Young's point about understanding how school financing works at the state level. It's not that complicated, but there are a lot of people in Boston and the eastern part of the state who hope that we don't figure it out. So I would encourage people who are interested to try to figure it out. And Greg knows what I'm talking about here, but there's something called the cap on local contributions. That hurts almost every town in the western part of the state. Leiden benefits from it. That's the only town that I know of that does. Maybe a couple of others. But over $1 billion gets transferred to towns that don't have the ability to pay away from towns that do because of the cap. So if that intrigues you, find out more. I'd be happy to talk to you. But there's a place where the state wouldn't have to spend any more money. They just have to change what they do, what they expect us to come up with.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. On the local aid, I just wanted to raise a few points, if I could, and questions. So first of all, to the other, okay, B. Jacques, Chair of the Select Board in Northfield. First of all, I do want to thank everyone for all the hard work, because it definitely shows. I also want to say there's a bunch of us that, including, and mostly me, who are really trying to understand the financing part of it and also some of the educational lingo that I think folks from school committees and maybe this planning board are much more comfortable with. So I think, Mike, to your point, it actually would be helpful to either have a separate slide or a separate meeting for town officials on how state aid, specifically with respect to education, works, because it's confusing. I have to ask like our town administrator on a regular basis, explain to me again what hold harmless is and Chapter 70, because as a select board person who's on my 3rd year, I'm still getting up to speed on all of the things associated with being on the select board. And now I'm trying to get up to speed on things that have to do with education financing so that I can better understand the impact on the town, right? So I've been going through, I just want to put that out there as a possible suggestion. On the dollar assumptions, I think we're going to eat that 400K right up. The savings, I think the assumption that these are going to basically, these assessments are going to stay where they are, I don't see that happening just based on the meeting we had with PVRS 2 weeks ago with Warwick leaving the district. What was explained to us was that in the initial year following that for PVRS, that there might be a 7% increase request. That will eat up the $400,000 for Northfield right there. So I'm all for great education and educational opportunities. I really need to understand the financial part of it in order to help sell and explain the educational part of it, right? I think all the things that you've said are great, great benefits, but I would love to see more on options with respect to finances because we will get hit. I know, because I watch the Bernardston Select Board meetings. We will be asked these questions. We will have to go before the town meeting to even just explain what we're doing with our current setup, never mind a new one. So I just would love to see a little bit more on finances, and while it might be unpopular, maybe we do need to put what taking away a facility would look like, because it would make a dramatic. When I went through the budgets this past weekend just to see, and most of the money goes to salary, and a lot of it goes to shared services, and a lot of it goes to buildings. And you look at your levers, and if your state aid isn't going up, then your expenses have to come down. It's really hard to do that with labor and personnel. Very hard to do that without significant consequences. So I would like to put that maybe on the table. It might be more attractive, while not politically acceptable, if the savings were such and the resulting impact on education and financial savings were such, okay, maybe it would be worth considering as a taxpayer. The other question
Could I just make
yeah.
a comment there so I don't lose it?
Yeah.
We'll work on the second part of your statement about the education and that piece. But I'm going to suggest that Tracy Novak did a presentation at a Pioneer School Committee meeting, and it's on the BNC TV network, because I went back and watched it again.
Yep.
She did a phenomenal job. And what she did was she explained the foundation formula, how it's built, how it's put together, and she broke it down town by town. So if you go on the website, if you go onto their network, and maybe Tyler can direct you to where that is, you will find it incredibly helpful.
Maybe
filling that, she called them building blocks, and she uses
Yes.
Legos. You'll love it.
I'm more than happy to do that. To be honest with you, I watch a lot of meetings in addition to going to meetings. And it would be helpful, not opposed to watching more video. I watched Deb's video twice before I came.
She did the best job ever.
I told her she has a
I'm
fantastic
talking
audio
about Tracy
voice.
Novak.
Oh,
Deb did a wonderful job.
On Tracy,
She did a
sorry, I'm
wonderful
talking
job.
about Deb. I'm
She
talking
did a
about
wonderful
Deb.
job. I've seen a lot of presentations on the foundation formula.
That's
Tracy Novak did one of the most outstanding, thorough jobs I've ever seen.
That's great. Could we just all get it in like one location with like an intro slide that maybe on...
We still have
Yes, I
ours.
know that. I'm just saying that it's a lot of information to absorb.
Yeah.
just putting it out there as somebody who has to absorb a lot of
Can I just
info.
add to that, which
Yeah.
is, we, about halfway through this process in the last 3 years, we saw the writing on the wall that combining the districts would put the larger district into hold harmless. I don't think DESE saw that coming. And so we actually had a number of meetings with both DESE and our legislators to say, look, if you want regionalization to happen, especially in the western part, and we have one district where the base aid, is so much higher than foundation aid is going to drive the two districts into whole harmless, what will the state do to provide incentive so that you're not faced with actually being punished financially? So they are aware of it. That's one of the, we were also a part of the Rural Commission report, so you'll see things in there about regionalization that came out of discussions that we had with the commission. So you'll see, actually putting in proposals to the state legislator to make transition money happen, to be able to possibly put some incentive money into regionalization for this very reason, because we were of the same mindset.
Okay.
Yeah.
I should have clarified. I know where to look and how to read charts and how to look at PowerPoint. I think as you take this out into the larger community, I'm speaking as someone who does a lot of homework, and if I'm having difficulty with citing chapter and verse about Chapter 70 and hold harmless and all the other things that go along with educational financing, there needs to be a simple slide that just kind of brings that all forward and then allows people to go off and find it. I'm not saying I'm not willing to go do more homework. I already do a lot. It's just going to be, it sounds like it's going to be necessary, though, for folks to truly understand the impact. One of the impacts of merger is understanding the finances part of it. And that's really super hard for people. As you know, most people don't tackle the finance part in their questions until they get to annual town meeting. So, in my experience so far in the last couple of years. On the enrollment assumptions,
there are other people here. Do you think you could get to the bottom line? I don't want to be rude, but
oh, I'm sorry.
I think you need to cede the floor to
Okay.
other questionnaires.
Okay, I was sorry. Thank you. Let me just really quick.
No,
It's okay.
Yep, I.
Said, we've been sitting here listening, and there are 5 other towns, and I think you're hogging
Okay.
the floor. I'm sorry, I don't want to be rude. That's my opinion.
Thank you. I appreciate that straightforward opinion. I guess the key thing then is, because I still do have more questions, especially about enrollment assumptions and the length of time of those enrollment assumptions. So perhaps to your point, how do we get more questions answered if we are diving into the details of the data?
Thank you.
Jane.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Sorry about that. No. Thank you.
They should send us an email. Write down your questions and send us an email.
I'm Steve Neston, Power Finance Committee, Bernardston. If indeed Pioneer Valley faces its financial, the cliff, and we're about to fall off, what do you envision to be the time frame for moving on? You can study. We can study ad nauseum as we continue to fall off. We start falling off the cliff. We're now standing on it. What do you see?
Well, that's a tough question. Yeah. I guess, and this is my personal opinion right now, I would say we're going to see that more, the reality of that more as the ESSER funds end, which is in 23 23, right?
Next
The end
year,
of
yeah.
23.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be the first shoe falls.
Is he asking about our timeline? Our timeline, though?
Yeah. And now, are you asking our timeline?
Or what do you envision? I'm envisioning in my mind, a patient is on the operating table, and there are 5 surgeons. Well, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this. As the patient continues to flatline, oh, Jesus, we talk too much, now the patient's dead.
But are you addressing that to us in terms of
No,
our
well,
timeline?
I'm
or?
saying I'm using it
Yeah.
as an analogy.
Are we the surgeons here?
Well, in essence, you are.
I hope not.
You're
Yeah.
driving a very complicated, a very
Yeah.
time-consuming procedure where one of the patients is about to fall off a
So
cliff.
quickly, I would say we're not driving it. The town's asked us to do this. So, we're working on behest of you, but where we are in our grant cycle is we have a plan to do more outreach like we're doing now because we didn't have a chance to do it during the pandemic. So this is much overdue and needed. But we would like to be, as a board, looking to make a decision as to whether to move forward. If we vote to move forward, let's say in the next 3 to 4 months, then a regional district agreement has to be drafted, which we have, cross our fingers, with the newest grant, have procured the funds for that. When we did that with the assumption that we may or may not. If we don't, we won't use the funds.
I think to
But-
your point,
so
though,
it would take
it's
another
a
year.
flat line because of
Yeah.
this. The earliest we could put that together and get it to the towns for a vote
Will be the following year.
would be the following year.
Yeah.
So maybe the patient's dead, I don't know.
Well, I'm looking at, I've gone through superintendents. Pioneer Valley now does not have an appointed principal in the 3 schools. It's madness. And yes, there are so many problems, but one of these districts is in serious trouble. It's in transition because one of the towns is leaving. So now we're going to have to consider a 5-town and a 6-town? Whoa! Why don't we extend it another few years? I know it's very complicated, but one of the districts here does not have the luxury of time. It doesn't.
Yeah. And Gil Montague is.
And, something drastic happens, just the salaries alone. Pioneer Valley has one of the lowest salary ranges in Massachusetts. I know I'm a retired teacher, and I was paying from a Chapter 70, total Chapter 70, and our salaries were very high. So there automatically is a problem because now Gil Montague is going to have to suck up these people, and they're going to have to raise raises. There's so many problems. I don't know if Pioneer Valley can survive long enough. That's what I'm saying. Because right now, it's 19 students in 9th grade, and there should have been, it wasn't 17 because the 2 who were on wait listed at the tech school didn't get in. 19, that's sustainable? Not according to my calculations.
Yeah, and I would,
I
Gil Montague also has ESSER funds as well. So I think to David's point, we cannot be too comfortable in our financial situation, even in Gil Montague. But I will say that looking at the political hurdles of trying to make a bigger district, it's been hard enough to keep this board together, which to our credit, we've kept this board together pretty well. But every time you expand outward, you have to have more people on your planning board. And so what I'm saying is what we see politically feasible and in terms of the educational and financial considerations is that at least we're trying to do something to mitigate our own circumstances. Because you're right, if it goes down off the cliff, it's going to be forced upon us. DESE will eventually take over, and that will be it.
Before teaching, I have an MPA. I was a public administrator. And what you are taking on, taking two districts in financial difficulty and trying to turn an economy of scale, as you know, is very risky and unfortunately fails many times. I'm just concerned that the process is so overwhelmingly complex that one of the districts is not going to survive. Or we're going to be forced into the state is going to crush us into making an unhealthy decision. And I don't want to see that done. And I think, yes, we have a monumental decision to make, but we also don't have the luxury of endless time.
And we understand that.
Totally
We'll
agree.
work as hard as we can to get this process done and follow the procedures that the state has outlined on how a planning board has to, the tasks that we have to do in order to form a new district. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Mike wants to speak again. Anybody else?
So you get the last word, and then you're going to wrap it up, Jane?
Well, I don't know if this is the last word. I appreciate your pessimism. I think it's justified. But I was in the situation of watching Gil Montague head to a cliff about 14 years ago. And at the time, we also heard that we needed to do something or the state would come in and take us over. And my perception, having watched what did happen, which, among other things, the district and the towns made an agreement for financial sustainability, which has lasted until now and has worked pretty well. But I don't think the state has a clue what to do. I think the threat that the state is going to come in and do something, they would have to have a plan for what to do with a district that isn't sustainable. And I don't think they have a plan. That's why I think why their response always is, oh, you don't want us to take over. You should figure it out yourselves locally because that's local control. What they're really saying is we don't have a clue. And we should be pushing the state to come up with a clue since they have experts and say, what present us, they say, well, you don't want us dictating. We say, okay, fine, don't dictate. Present us with some workable alternatives for us to consider. So I think that the Pioneer certainly has a problem. Gil Montague also has a problem. I think it's a smaller problem, my personal opinion. I think that along with all of our efforts, which I don't think should slow down, I think pushing the state, and in particular DESE, to start coming up with helpful solutions instead of just threats that they're going to come in if we don't figure it out ourselves is a way to go.
May I?
No.
I would like to respond, if I may. I see, one of the problems that I see is I believe one of the districts does not believe it has a serious problem. If you look at the budget from last year and the budget of this current year, you will see draconian increases in salaries, and I'm not a pessimist. What I am is I'm doubtful. But I still want to see this. I want to see both districts survive. I want to see us to thrive. I think it's very important for our sustainability to have a really good school district. And how that is achieved, okay.
Thank you, everybody. Alan said I should wrap it up. Okay. You ready? Oh.
One last thing. Could you jump back to the slide with the tech school where it showed that really low line with their, Can we explain this one? I mean, what are we looking at for a number on here? Because it just, so we're looking at the total district's enrollment numbers up at the top. So what does the yellow line represent for the Franklin County Tech School? Just the students from our district that are enrolling there? Is roughly around like 150? 150 is what that line represents?
Yeah. Mike, you want to
Less than 150.
expand?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the grass.
Yeah, this is really in response, and a number of people have commented in conversations about what's going on with the districts, that one of their perception is a problem is that the tech school is pulling students away from either of the districts. And what this does is simply show how the tech school enrollment compares with the enrollments of the two districts. So in particular for Pioneer, what this shows, and as again, the actual numbers are in the underlying spreadsheet, but this shows that the foundation enrollments for Pioneer, which is the black line, okay, has been declining. And that's what affects your state aid. The enrollment, the foundation enrollment for Franklin County is basically the kids who go to Franklin County from the Pioneer schools. That has remained more or less constant, okay? That line went up a little bit, seems to be coming down slightly, but it hasn't really dramatically changed in the way that the black line has. The green line is the combination of the two. Those are all the kids that the Pioneer towns are responsible for educating. And that line has pretty much tracked the enrollment at Pioneer, and really is not the same as the enrollment of Franklin County Tech. Over on the Gilmonte side, the line is a little more variable for Franklin County Tech and has gone up somewhat in recent years. But again, the blue line is the foundation enrollment from Gill and Montague, and the green line, which is the total, it pretty much tracks, again, the blue line. And it doesn't really look like that yellow line on the bottom. So, people could draw whatever conclusion they want from that. The conclusion I draw is that Franklin County Tech is not really a factor in declining enrollment in either district.
Well, it's not as much as people think in terms of it's other factors like declining population, declining enrollment within the district. So that was the point of the slide. It's a little tricky though because you're looking at total district enrollment, and as you know, it's only 9 through 12 when you send to Franklin County Tech. So you kind of have to sift through it a little bit in terms of how you perceive it. But
you also hear from people down there that they're like bursting at the seams and they've grown exponentially, but that doesn't mean it's from our district. It means
right. We've got the 19 other districts. So
19 towns in Franklin County Tech, and we are one member. Of each of us here is one of the members of that district.
I just want to say as we wrap this up that I think one of the things we are doing as a planning board, and to both of your points, we're sort of pioneers in that we're doing the work, in my opinion, that the state should be doing. Because we're creating the blueprint of these are the things you have to know. These are the things you have to understand. This is what our findings are. When Greg and I had a conversation with DESE officials, there was an aha moment when we started sharing the data and the impact it was going to have on the communities. And we didn't like their answer. They didn't like ours. So I think in the end, they're going to have to assess their position on regionalization. And I hope it is in such a way to say, if this is something that we really encourage communities to do, then we're going to have to pony up and change the formula, change the way we're doing some of these things to encourage these economies of scales that we think are a good idea. When we're done, we're either going to agree that it is a good idea or it's not, but they'll be able to look at our work and say, okay, anyone else want to consider this? Maybe it's too small. Maybe it needs to be bigger. We'll provide that.
Change coming as well,
Okay.
and we don't know about that.
Excuse me, I was asked to wrap this up, and I'm not going to be interrupted again. I'm going to wrap it up so everybody can go home and have a cup of coffee or whatever. I said or whatever. I think that when we think about finances, one of the things that we have to remember is that the costs in the districts as they stand now are going to go up. So when we start trying to build a financial model for a 6-town district, and we're looking at numbers that are maybe higher than the 37 million, that's got to be compared to what's going to happen at Pioneer and what's going to happen at Gil Montague. Pioneer is relying so heavily on outside funds right now. When those get rolled into the budget, oh my God, where are we going to be? So that's my financial statement. But thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for all your questions. And any comments, any suggestions, any more questions?
Good job.
It's not up there anymore, but you know what it was. Thank you all. Oh, excuse me, we have some meetings we have to close.